So, welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Jarom here. Hi!
Hi, good to be here. Thanks, Eva.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us here because I always love to check out your art on Instagram, super colorful and positive. So I'm
Thank
super happy
you.
that you
Yeah,
joined.
thanks. No, I'm super excited to do this.
Oh, so cool. And for people who maybe don't know your art, and of course I will show it here, like in the corner. And
Yeah.
what is your specialty? And if you can tell us a little bit more, like what you focus on mainly these days.
Yeah, so I do, it's a little bit hard to describe, but it's kind of like sort of cutout type of art, but digitally. So like really strong shapes with colors and textures in them. And I just try to do like really graphic. It's like almost more towards the graphic design side of things in some ways, but kind of just fun characters and stuff like that. And then what I focus on these days, I mean, mostly still that kind of thing, but just it tends to be a lot more for clients and a lot less for personal work these days, which is great. But
Yeah.
and then I've been doing some code stuff as well, which is kind of fun, just mixing that with my art, and that's been really exciting.
So how did you get to all of this? Did you start with graphic design, or you were like, okay, I'll just do only illustration, or how was your journey to this point?
I mean, like I've always loved drawing, like I think as probably most people on here have said, but like I took art classes all through high school, and it was like my senior year of high school. Well, actually, the year before I was in an AP art class, which is like a advanced art class thing in the US. And I took the AP art test and just failed it so badly. And I'd been doing all of these like rendered things, like kind of realistic type of drawing, and then like a bunch of abstract stuff. And I think partly I just didn't have a good focus. So the next year I took the same class, but I did sort of the 2D design test instead, and just completely changed my style. I had come across some artists who were doing like paper cutout artwork, and it just came so naturally to me when I started doing that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a breath of fresh air. Like you don't have to do everything realism. Because I like honestly, I've just been always so bad at realism, like the the rendering and the yeah. So I guess it kind of started there, and then in college I sort of did the same thing, but with masking film and acrylic paints, which was very tedious, but I'd like cut out the shapes with an X-Acto knife and then fill in the colors with acrylics. And then eventually I sort of went through an illustrator phase, and then got to like Photoshop, and now Procreate is what I'm using now. But yeah, it's all kind of the same sort of process though, to some degree, where it's like big shapes with sort of gradients and colors in them. Yeah, I guess I should say I also majored in illustration in college. Yeah, I actually studied dentistry first, though, and so yeah.
Yeah, that
So
sounds a little bit different direction.
yeah, I've been all
then
over the place, I
yeah,
guess.
so dentistry was like because you cannot focus on it on high school already. Can you do some
No, that
like
was it.
classes? That was college, right?
That was college. Yeah, so that's when I got to college. I don't know. Am I skipping ahead on the questions?
Yeah, it's all good. It's like natural flow, right?
Yeah. So yeah, in college, I like my school didn't have a pre-dental major, so I was planning on being a dentist. But they say you can major in whatever you want as long as you take these pre-dental classes, you know? And so I was like, well, I want to major in art. And so I was just doing the illustration major, but actually taking all of the dental like science classes on the side,
Okay.
which was so much work. But I think I kind of enjoyed being an enigma on both sides. So like I
So
would
you're a
teach people in the
special in
science
both
classes.
worlds.
Yeah, exactly. So I would be like, oh, well, I'm actually an art student. And they would all just be floored. Like, oh, what? And then kind of the same thing in the art classes. But eventually I decided, I don't know, I just realized that I would hate actually being a dentist, and kind of came to this realization that like, wait, I can actually do art as a career, and like, why would I not do that if I can, you know?
Yeah,
And
that's true.
yeah, it was a big decision, and it was scary, but I'm just so glad that I did that.
And when you were actually deciding like on the also the art style and the illustration direction, were you thinking like, okay, what would be like my client base, or because the certain art style have
Yeah,
used in a
yeah,
certain areas, right? The
yeah.
animation or publishing, or basically why did you decide it for this like 2D cutout design, or like basically more simple shapes?
Yeah, I wish I had like actually thought that through more than I did. But really, I think I just did it because that's what I enjoyed doing, and that's what I felt like I was good at. I did kind of want to do children's books, and I still want to do more of that than I am now. But yeah, just getting into I think it's just a matter of doing what you like. And I know there's been like a lot of talk about style, and there's kind of this hashtag going around on Twitter about your 4 styles. And I think a lot of students especially really worry about finding a specific style. And I don't think you need to worry about it so much or plan it. As long as it's something that you enjoy doing and you feel like you're passionate about, I think that's going to show through, and then people will respond to that.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
For sure. Because it's like you see so many, and of course, especially on social media, people will tell you like, yeah, you have to have a consistent style because then people get confused, they don't want to follow you, and so on and so on.
Right.
But yeah, social media following and the client, it's like 2 different things, right? So
yeah, it really is. It's a weird thing. And I mean, I think you do need to have some, like, you need to be able to show that you can consistently work in a style, but that doesn't mean you have to limit yourself to one style, right? Like, I think when you're working with a client, they want to be able to look at your work and expect you to produce something like what they are seeing. But if you have a few styles, I think that's also just fine, as long as you can kind of consistently do that same thing if you need to.
Yeah. So how many pieces would you say, like maybe like, okay, this to show the consistent art style, 10, 100, or like something on the landing page on the website, or because you have really
at least
cool,
1,000. Yeah. No. I think probably like 3 or 4 of a specific style. I mean, I'm not a very good example of this because I really think I only have like the one style, more or less. But I think just enough to kind of show maybe a little bit of variety within that style of subject matter and things like that, just to show that you can do that and make things look consistent. So I mean, whether that's 3, 4, or 5 pieces, I don't think you have to have 100 by any means, but just a few.
And so when clients come to you now, do they refer to specific artwork like, oh, we really love this one, or, we would like to create something based on this collection?
Yeah, they do. I'm always a little discouraged when it's like my older work that happens with. So sometimes they'll pull something from like 3 years ago, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I can actually still work that way, But yeah, they will do that a lot of the time. They'll kind of have like a sheet where they've pulled up a bunch of example artwork that they want me to sort of mimic, or that they will say like, we really like this about this piece or this particular aspect or something.
Yeah. So for example, can you share something what they like or what they kind of mention about your art? Like, we really love this.
Yeah, I've had a few people who really like the way I do eyes in certain pieces. So like, I guess that is one thing that I do differently. Sometimes I'll have like more detailed eyes, and then I'll switch to like little dot eyes in some of mine. And I think personally, I kind of gravitate toward the little dot eyes because it just has sort of like a Lego person quality or something, where it's like, that thing where you can kind of project yourself onto the character better the more like simple the character is. I think that's something Scott McCloud talks about, but it's like this idea that like, if the less detail you put in the face, the more somebody relates to it. So I think I gravitate towards that, but I have had a few clients who specifically ask me to like do this other style that I've done where it's like a little bit more detail in the eyes. So there are probably some other things that I can't think of right now, but that's, yeah.
So if you can share with the audience, like what type of clients do you work with now, so they can connect your artwork with where they can see it?
Yeah, sure. I just finished a project with Spotify for a page about podcasting. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I'm like blanking on this now. I've done some work for Disney, just a couple things for their Instagram, for Adobe, for Procreate. I guess that's one of my biggest and one of my favorite clients personally. They just have me do some things to kind of showcase the app.
Yeah. So you can tell the story, how the app is used, and then kind of project even more through the illustrations, which is hard through photos, actually.
Well, and they're really fun to work with because a lot of the time the brief that they give you is just sort of like, they might have something a little bit specific to showcase a certain feature or something, but mostly it's just like, draw something cool that you like. And I think my art tends to turn out a lot better when I have more control over the subject matter and things like that. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of other clients. I should have written this down somewhere. It's on my website somewhere.
Yeah. Because it's more like, you don't have to mention like specific clients. It's like, okay, like editorial, illustration, or is it, as you said, like app icons and characters and this type of thing. For Disney, I guess it was some like story image, right? It was the Alice in Wonderland, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes,
I saw that. And I did one with Madame Mim a little while ago. They let me choose a Disney villain to do, and I was like,
cool.
My favorite one, obviously, is from Sword in the Stone. And yeah, so I guess the type of work that I've been doing, it's a little bit like just sort of stylized things like that thing for Disney or Procreate where it's just to show off things. Or I've been getting a lot of work for websites recently. So sort of like startups that want illustrations like for marketing for their website. Yeah. Or then kind of a few advertising types of things as well. I did a pitch for Pepsi recently. I still haven't heard whether I got it or not, but it's paid, so it counts, right?
That's true. That it was a gig, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so kind of like advertising, a little bit of publishing. So I've done a few things for some magazines. Yeah, so sort of publishing, advertising, marketing type of that area more than concept type of stuff.
And if you think about like, because your artwork is simplified, as you say, also for the website, do you have to work sometimes in vector, or do you always work in like Procreate and Pixel?
I try to always work in Procreate and Pixel, but occasionally the client will want me to work in vector, which I'm fine with because I did do that for quite a while in school. But it is a weird experience going back and trying to sort of adapt to the way that I work now in vector. It's like, how did I do this when I was in school? It's just so different. I don't know. But so I don't love working in vector, but I actually recently found the Affinity Designer app for iPad, and so it's a vector. It's kind of like Illustrator, but an iPad version, and I just really like the way it works. I feel like it works well with the types of things I do. It does like clipping masks really easily and gradients, and you can like rotate the canvas around as you draw, which is really nice.
Yeah, so, that's quite useful. Yeah, because I also used to do a lot of vector design when I was in Lego, and then we were doing the minifigures and all of that. But when you transition, then I kind of stopped using Illustrator as much, so I'm more comfortable with Procreate and Photoshop. So it's like really fast, and then when you go to Illustrator, it's like
yeah, and it's like what?
Like you press different buttons.
Illustrator's a great program. I don't want to say anything negative, but it is like this weird it's a mental shift, right?
Yeah. It's more like what you are used to. If you are used to using Illustrator every day, I mean, there are so many awesome tools and the updates and everything, then I like it as well, as you said, but it was more like the transition where you spend more time.
Yeah, I didn't realize you'd done work for Lego. That's so cool.
Yeah. I was there
I was bringing it up earlier. That wasn't even the name drop thing.
Yeah. Many years. There. So I started as a graphic designer for the minifigures, and then I continue as a concept artist and doing some so cool. design.
Big Lego fan. I've loved Legos forever. So.
Yeah, they're fun. Yeah. It's a cool product. I totally agree, and a lot of nice art.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so if we go back actually to your experiences and the artwork, maybe we can kind of talk about like how did you get your first client, right? So when you finished the school, or even during the school, how was the transition for you, and basically what did you do, kind of like step-by-step guide?
Yeah, sure. So I finished school in 2015, and while I was in school, I was working as I think I was working as a developer at the time, actually, at a company in Utah, I'm from Utah. I guess I didn't mention that. Living in Portland now. I was working as a web developer and then sort of transitioned into design. I can't remember if that happened before or after I graduated, but I was always kind of in both a little bit.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, like you mentioned before, just sort of like, did I have a part-time job? So I actually worked there for about 2 years after graduating and sort of gradually shifted into part-time until I cut it off altogether, and I'm doing full-time freelance as of a little over a year ago. But as I was doing that full-time job, I just started taking on freelance jobs on the side. And my first one was, they actually contacted me. It was for a apparel company in Utah called Cotopaxi. Yeah. And I think they had reached out to my school and asked if they had anybody that they would suggest. And one of my teachers recommended me for the job just to do some t-shirt designs for them. So be nice to your teachers, I guess.
It's always a good plan. Yeah. Or just be nice to everyone, right? Because then, you never know.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's such an interesting thing, though. It's like, you really don't know where these jobs are going to come from. Like, I've had a lot come through social media, but then it's like, once you start getting out there, it just kind of comes from all over the place,
Yeah, that's true. So now, as you mentioned, so it was through school, and when you had the part-time job, it was more the coding, right? Or also some design for the school?
The part-time job wasn't at the school. Sorry, that wasn't very clear. The part-time job was at some company in Utah, but I was doing coding and design
Okay,
I
yeah,
sort
so
of started
combination.
more in coding, moved to design, but kind of stayed in both, like one foot in each side, and sort of leaned over to design more
Okay,
almost.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like PHP or like the JavaScript, or
Um,
you work
yeah,
with Java,
JavaScript,
right? Yeah.
JavaScript. I do, yeah,
Yeah.
JavaScript and HTML, CSS mostly, yeah.
Yeah, 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 that's true. Yeah, because it developed so fast. I mean, yeah, I also studied coding, but then I found out like,
Yeah,
it's not really for me. But yeah,
right, yeah. It's like I still enjoy it as sort of a hobby, but I don't think I'd want to do it as
yeah,
as a
yeah.
career.
I think I dropped it as a hobby. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the thing when you like forgot one dot and that doesn't work, and it's
Yes,
just like
yes,
no.
absolutely. And I was like, why is this not working? And then, yeah, it's always some stupid little thing where you like misspelled something. Yeah.
Yeah. I still need to try the cool thing. I forgot what is it called when you do the illustration and then it kind of turns right in the phone.
Yeah, the parallax
Yeah,
thing.
the
Yeah.
parallax. Yeah, it looks so
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been kind of like pushing that as sort of a side project hobby thing for, I don't know, like a few years now. Yeah, I actually just did a workshop about that at Lightbox Expo. So
Oh, about that
I
one.
had to
Okay,
like go through and
perfect.
try to figure out like when did I start doing this? And it's like I guess I've actually been sort of gradually improving whatever it is I'm doing with that for a few years now.
Oh, nice. So, and then do you do this also for clients or not right now?
I have a couple times, not very often. I would love to get hired for more of that sort of thing. I love like mixing those two sides of because doing code and doing illustration use such different parts of my brain that it's like I can work on the illustration part, and when I'm tired, I switch to the code, and it just feels like a break. But it's like just totally different way of thinking, and I actually really like doing both of those. So.
But that's really cool. And I'm thinking about some other people when they're more creative and they would say like it's more relaxing to do the illustration and the code that would be, the very focused
Yeah.
part. So
It
it's
depends. It
fun.
depends on how the code is going. If it's going poorly, then it's not relaxing.
Yeah,
But when
yeah.
it works, it's actually like very satisfying. It's like you do something and it works, and it's just this sort of little dopamine rush or something. It's like, yes, I'm the god of this computer. Like,
And it's like it works how I want.
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you said as well, like okay, so you went full-time freelance last year, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah, yeah. And so how was this transition for you? Was it easy to, yeah, like set up all the entities? Because even though you took some jobs before, so you already had freelance setup, I guess. Was it a lot of change for you?
Not as much as I expected. I finally switched to full time because we moved to Oregon. So because my wife is going to physical therapy school out here, and it was sort of like, okay, now is the time to just finally cut it off and see if I can do this as a full time thing. And I actually signed on with an agent a couple months before moving, I think. So it was kind of this really convenient timing and transition that we could just kind of do all of that at once. And it was really scary still, though. Just this, because it's a big change, right? But it went a lot smoother than I expected. And I ended up wishing I had done it sooner, I guess, if anything.
Yeah, yeah, but that's good. That's always a good sign.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, like, I really don't even remember it being that rough. It's like moving was kind of hard, but that's always hard.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
mean, that's
as far as
just
the
pure
transition goes,
annoying, but yeah.
yeah, I was a little scared to work by myself all day. But that hasn't been nearly as bad as I expected to. And maybe I just have the right personality for it, that it's like I'm kind of okay doing my own thing all day long and not talking to anybody. But
Yeah. And then, so
yeah,
do
effectively
you feel
good.
you are more introverted or extroverted? If you say it like you are okay being at home, I guess it's more introverted.
I think more introverted for the most part. I can kind of cross over the line when I need to. So I don't know. It's like I've taken those personality quizzes and they usually put me like somewhere in between. So
Yeah, so that's good. So you can work
yeah.
in both worlds. So that's perfect, convenient. And when you said
Yeah.
also the agent, how did you find
Yeah, yeah.
the perfect agent or someone who would fit with you?
Again, he actually contacted me. I'd had a couple people reach out before, and I wish I had handled it better, but I think I just sort of ghosted them because I was too scared to kind of move forward with that at the time. But he contacted me, just reached out and just asked if I wanted to hop on a call, and I talked to him, and it just seemed like it would be a really good fit, and it's actually been really great.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, that was scary because signing on with an agent can be, it's like if it's a bad relationship, it can be really bad. I mean, like any relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he takes percentage only of the jobs he will bring to you, and the other jobs which are maybe from Instagram or something like that, you have different agreement, or how does it
He
work?
does a percentage of everything for the U.S. right now.
Okay,
So
yeah.
Yeah, and then a few clients that I already had, I keep for myself. But yeah, so which I was a little nervous about, but he's done a really good job of like justifying that. Like he gets me more money. He handles those talks about money, which I always hate. And
So he
he's been
can
bringing
negotiate the prices for you
yeah,
and everything. Oh, perfect. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, because that's tough in the industry when you are like in the, like starting out and you're like, okay, they want, for example, 3 illustrations, and you're like,
Yeah,
okay, I have to ask when it's going to be used, or what is the location, and how should I
yeah,
ask for the
exactly.
price, and all of that.
And
So
I just hate having those conversations. I hate doing that kind of thing. And then, especially when you're starting out, you just don't know how much things are worth too. So, like, people will ask you, how much do you usually charge? And it's like, I have no idea. So you just kind of throw out a number. And then if they accept it too fast, then it's like, oh no, I should have asked for more, you know?
yeah, yeah, because also it depends if it is like used on packaging or in advertising, or how
Right,
much, how much
right.
money they are going to make with it, or is it just like in a presentation, or what is it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So do you have
Uh,
some tips about that, or you would just suggest to people to get agent?
um, I don't think I'd get an agent right away. I think you should kind of have some experience with that. I wish I had better tips about kind of how much to charge and things like that. I mean, you are worth more than you think you are if you're new. I guess that's my advice. So you'll get people who will reach out and ask you to like work for exposure and things like that. And of course, that's a bad idea. Don't do that unless you know it's going to be really, really incredible exposure. But I guess there are situations when it might be okay, but almost always it's not.
Yeah. Or maybe like a brand you really like and you want to have 1 or 2 jobs at the beginning,
Yeah,
like yeah, if
yeah, to
you
sort of
yeah.
like make your kind of add something to your website to sort of establish a reputation.
Yeah, so you have like you can commission yourself so to projects, so to tell a story, and then maybe if you have 1 or 2 real clients, that helps. So
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I still wouldn't work for free, especially if it's a big client. They can afford to pay you, like make them pay you.
yeah, for sure, for
Uh,
sure.
but yeah, I think just don't be scared to ask for as much money as you've heard you should ask for, or at least close to that, because they're going to tell you if it's wrong. I don't think I've ever had a client that I would actually have wanted to work with who is too scared away because I asked for money,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
And do you have ever like months or times when you feel like, oh, okay, I don't know when the next client will come, or are you booked all the time?
I mean, I've been pretty lucky to have been booked pretty consistently for the last year or two. I did have about a month and a half gap a few months ago, which was a little weird because I think I had like 4 projects I was working on at the same time, and then suddenly they were just all over.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, what do I do with myself?
Work
And
on personal
it's,
project.
yeah, and I did. But it's also this weird thing where it's like, wait, maybe like my work isn't in demand anymore, and you just start questioning yourself, you know? But yeah, I don't think that's it. I think it's more that when you're working really hard, I think that kind of happens to a lot of people because you tend to have less time to sort of market yourself as you're working on a lot of projects, and then you haven't really like lined things up for that gap, so you end up with sort of these like really busy and then nothing, and then really busy and then nothing.
Yeah, that's true, because it kind of can happen when you're like, okay, so now I did all the projects for the clients like this, and maybe there are no more like that.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So how do you then split your income streams? Is it mainly through the client work, and then you have also the Skillshare class, right? And
Yeah.
something else
Uh,
there?
yeah, mostly just those two. Mostly commissions, so freelance commissions that have mostly been coming through my agent lately. And then I did the Skillshare. So like that month and a half gap that I had, I just decided to do a coding Skillshare class because a lot of people have been asking about it. And it's like, well, I have time. I might as well do it now. I didn't really expect to make very much from it, but it did. For the amount of time I put in, it actually did really well. So I think I'd be interested in doing more of that kind of thing. And then I've done a few children's books, so I'm starting to get some royalties from those as well.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. But I think that's about it, unless there's secret income I don't know about.
Somewhere, some
Which would be
passive
nice,
income
right?
from
Yeah.
somewhere, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you are doing full-time illustration, no more coding right now.
No. think I've had a couple of requests about that sort of thing. And if it's just coding with no artwork, I'm going to say no to that kind of thing because it's just not my interest. It's like I don't want to move in that direction.
Yeah, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, because also like a lot of people when they are just deciding about like artistic career and being a freelance, you imagine something like, oh, I always have to have something on the side, or I cannot afford to go to restaurants, or you have to always live like very like super frugal or scrappy.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't know, how do you feel about this type of topic?
Well, I mean, there's sort of I think it's kind of the myth of the starving artist, that your parents always say like, no, you should be a dentist, don't be an artist. Yeah. But I've done actually really well. I've made a lot more money since I started freelance full time than I was making when I had the day job. So for whatever that's worth. And I think I've been really lucky. So, I mean, not everybody's going to have that same experience probably, but you can do it. Like, it's a totally viable career. I think the thing that is scary about freelance is it's inconsistent. So like you might make a ton of money one year and then just for whatever reason you don't make as much the next year. So you do have to be a little bit more cautious with your money, I think. Yeah. But it's actually been really good so far for me. So I've been really pleased with it.
Oh, nice. So you didn't have to think like, oh, I have to move to a cheaper place for a start and these type of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just a little bit of a cheapskate anyway. So maybe it's just that I already live that way regardless of whether I'm freelance or not.
Yeah. Because some people think, like when you go, when you're starting out, so either moving with a parent or going to some super cheap place, like you go at least to like Thailand or you go to Bali or like Eastern Europe somewhere, I don't know where.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, we have not had to do that. So yeah, we've been really lucky. But I mean, that actually sounds kind of fun though, the Thailand thing or something. So if you can get good internet, you could make it work,
Definitely. You should guys try it. But as you said, like if she's studying, then it's probably tricky, but maybe she can take a break.
Maybe in a couple years we'll have to consider that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I heard that there is like pretty good entrepreneurial community, in especially Thailand and Bali. Yeah. So maybe some
definitely.
new inspiration.
I've heard of people going to like Central America and things like that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds really nice. I don't know.
So maybe, as you said, in the next few years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you can describe maybe a little bit of your process when you are working on a client project, like how does it look like with maybe the sketches or the colored work? So if you can tell us a little bit more of these like steps of the process.
Yeah, well, I mean, so when I get a client, like a new client project, I usually try to start off with a phone call, first of all, just to sort of talk through things as much as possible, because you want to get kind of aligned on the idea or as closely as you can before you start on the sketches. Because I've gotten into projects where you just go back and forth on sketches forever and they just don't like what you're doing and you're like, well, what do you want, So I found that that's super helpful. And then I'll tend to send like 1 to 3 thumbnail images. Usually I've done 3, but lately I've been thinking like, well, actually I can just start with 1 thumbnail a lot of the time if they're okay with that. And then they let me know if they want something else. And that saves a lot of time, which has been really nice. And then they choose one. And then I spend a really long time kind of blowing up that thumbnail sketch into a full sketch and just like really planning out all of my shapes and just trying to make sure I get all of the detail worked out there. And then I'll just, from there, it turns kind of tedious, I just use the lasso tool and kind of draw out all of the shapes, block in the colors, and then sort of spend forever tweaking them until I like the way the textures and the colors are working. Yeah. And I think that's about it. It's not terribly complicated.
And do you agree on the color scheme before you do the color work? Because I mean, it's possible to change, but of course it's easier to agree or set the colors, or they usually leave it to you, or it depends on the project, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on the project. A lot of the time they'll give me like a few key colors to work from, but they're usually pretty flexible about like start with these colors and then just kind of like you can have some flexibility within that though. Yeah. So that does happen. Sometimes I'll do a color study and send it to them if it's like really important that the colors are what they want. But the problem is a lot of the time I'll do a color study and I like how the color study turns out, but just kind of the way that I work with color, then it's actually kind of hard to reproduce that on the full size one. I don't know if other people have a problem with that, but
it depends, I guess, how much texture you use, right? Because if you use flat colors, you can have it in thumbnail and also in the big image. But when you have the colors like going through the other colors and all the shapes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll have like a lot of gradients and things, and it's really hard to kind of reproduce a gradient
Yeah.
from small. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so
Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
so I don't do color studies all the time. Mostly just if it seems like it's going to matter.
Yeah, and then when you like do the thumbnail sketch and the bigger sketch, do you have these like loops with the client, so you share it maybe through Google Drive or something like that, and wait
Oh
for the
yeah.
feedback?
It depends on the project.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I mean, for bigger projects, my agent has an Asana board that he'll
Mm-hmm.
set up, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
like a project management thing.
yeah. I use it every day.
Oh yeah, and it's been really great. But I mean, when it's a smaller project, usually the clients are like, "No, just send it over email, and we'll keep it more informal." And I think that works a little bit better for small things. But big things, it's actually really nice to have that thing to track. Like if you have 100 different illustrations or something, just to make sure
Yeah.
that you haven't lost anything, and you can keep the sketches and everything in one place.
Yeah, because that's definitely like helping when you are kind of like organized. And many, do you also tell them like, okay, you have my maybe 2 revisions for the sketch, or you don't limit this part?
My agent does have a limit. I don't think we enforce it super badly unless they are sort of abusing that, though.
Yeah,
It's usually
like
like you have
20
three
changes.
visions, but yeah, usually I'm working with people who have worked with artists before, so they kind of get the idea, or that they are artists themselves. Yeah, so usually that's not a problem, but we do have it in the contract just in case it's getting out of control.
Yeah, so this is actually a very good reminder, or the kind of note for people, like always have a contract when you're starting with someone.
Yes, absolutely, because I have been on those projects where it's just endless back and forth, and then it's not in the contract, so it's kind of hard to say, like, I'm sorry, but I've done 5 revisions on this thing already. We need to be done.
That's true. Because then also there is a deadline and all of that needs to be said. And do you also charge like half at the beginning and then half at the end, or do you just send the invoice at the end? Or I mean your agent?
Yeah, well, usually when I'm doing it myself, I just tend to charge at the end. My agent does try to get half of the commission up front, and then half at the end of the project. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the goal.
Yeah, because I mean, normally the clients are normal human, but I heard from one girl recently, what I met here, that she was like, oh, I was doing this private commission, and then they told me that they never received it, and they sent me money, and I'm like, if they would send you money, probably they would chase after it, and then it's just, all bad and weird, and I'm like,
that's scary.
Bad. Yeah. So, but I guess that happens also with the private commissions, when just someone randomly writes you like, oh, can you draw me? And then,
I always say no to those. I'm too scared to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, because then I guess in those cases probably it's better to do the 50% at least upfront, and it's not a company, so it's more it's difficult.
Yeah, exactly. But even some companies, they just take forever to pay, and like for some reason they have it in their contract that it's like, sorry, we take 90 days to pay you. And it's like 90 days.
Yeah, it's just giant corporation. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. It's like, why? It's like, what about paying somebody takes 90 days? Yeah, I don't know why they do it, but
I guess
usually when it's a company, they do pay eventually, so it turns out okay.
Yeah, finance department, like, oh, they work only on the contracts like every
it's like they only work
months.
every 3 months. Sorry.
Well, okay. And actually, when you were mentioning also the art style and developing the art style, and you said also that the clients refer to the older artworks. So what do you feel like? What was the main progress, or how your art style changed over the past few years?
I think I've kind of simplified things a lot. So the way I was doing characters when I first sort of started getting work, I think I put a little bit more detail into faces, a little bit more textures, and now I've sort of come to this place where it's a little bit more about color and a little bit just more simplified, just characters. And honestly, this is something that I kind of go back and forth on, though. That it's I want to push that texture more. I don't know. It's kind of a weird balance. Yeah. And I find that I have to sort of kind of push myself to say nope, you're using that soft brush too much. You need to go back to something a little harsher to kind of intentionally get that in there.
Yeah, and do you have special inspirational boards, maybe on Pinterest or photography or artists? You always look for oh, this is interesting.
I don't have anything on Pinterest, but yeah, I just follow a lot of artists on Twitter and Instagram mostly, and just there's so many people who are so inspiring out there.
Yeah. And then where do you promote yourself mostly? Is it Instagram, I guess, and then, as you said, Twitter and other promotion?
I think mostly like when I'm doing my own personal promotion, mostly Instagram, I think. And I've actually had pretty decent success with that, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people do like the mailers with postcards or email lists
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And I probably should have done that, but I've never done that. Uh, and then I feel like Twitter is for me a little bit better for networking and less for getting work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have gotten some work through Twitter, but it seems just kind of the feeling I get is that Instagram people are looking more at your artwork and Twitter people are looking a little bit more at you as a person to some degree.
Yeah. Because a lot of times I don't know if people even read on Instagram what is written
Right,
there.
yeah.
It's like just scrolling and there's like, oh, this was this person. But if you have a specific style, they would just recognize it and they're like, okay, yeah, I know this guy or girl.
Yeah, exactly. And I never know what to write in those captions, so I hope they don't read them.
Yeah, because it's like if you do new artwork, or it's like, okay, new artwork.
Yeah, exactly. I'll always think of something like 10 minutes later. But when I sit down to like write that caption out, it's like just the deer in the headlights. Like I cannot think of anything. So I just end up doing like emojis or something. It's just like, I have no idea.
Yeah, well, emojis also have like, stuff to say. So that's good. Something is better than nothing.
Emojis are great. Yeah.
And do you have like a favorite thing to create? I guess it's characters as well. And but is there something like, okay, this always have to come through in your artwork, or you don't think like that?
A little bit. I think everybody kind of has some go-to things that they'll draw. It's just when you're drawing for yourself. For some reason, I like drawing deer a lot. There's a few of those scattered through my Instagram. I just think they're like really beautiful and elegant animals, and then people and plants. I really like just kind of having nature, and then sort of there's just this sense of adventure, like I want people to look at my art and feel sort of like happy and like some sort of exciting adventure and elegant. And I don't know that I always get all of that across, but those are sort of the ideals that I'm trying for.
Yeah.
And that ends up being sort of outdoors, people, animals, maybe swords sometimes, because what can I say? Swords.
Just cool. Yeah, they are just cool. Yeah.
They're just cool.
Yeah, because also you have like a flow in your illustrations, right? At least like that was like my impression of your artworks as well. When people are so like fluid and there is like a lot of action and interesting angles. So
yeah, I really like to get sort of that sense of motion and energy as well. And that's something that's actually kind of frustrating working with clients occasionally, is like the type of thing that I draw for myself tends to be like people in motion, people doing actions. And a lot of time they want like somebody standing in a room, which I can do, but it just feels so dead comparatively,
Yeah, it's more static for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the same is also with the toy design, right? When I was doing some like character design or something, everything needs to be like more static. Of course, there are like images when they are in action, but to show the outfit or how the toy would look like or the game, then you do all the static characters. So I guess
you have to do like the turnaround and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, steps of the process, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all good. But yeah, when I draw for myself, I usually start out with sort of like some sort of squiggle and sort of try to turn it into a person, because I really want to like keep that initial gesture. The action line. Yeah.
So that's the important step for sure. Yeah, because then you want the flow.
And it just kind of gives it this energy. Yeah.
And then you mostly work on Procreate on the new tablet, I guess you have, or
the iPad Pro. Yeah. I do almost all of my work unless somebody asks me to work in Vector, or very rarely if I have to work very large. Sometimes I'll jump over to Photoshop, but yeah, it's always a little painful.
Yeah, because with Procreate you have like, what is the maximum, 10,000 by 10,000 or something like that, or 8
I forget
by
exactly.
8?
Yeah, I forget. It's more that the layers get limited the bigger the canvas goes. And the way that I work is very layer focused.
So what is the size usually you work in? Or like, so you have that balance of layers and the resolution?
Right. I do like 4,000 by 3,000 as sort of a standard, or like 3, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 per side usually, and that tends to give me enough layers for the types of things that I'm doing. And
then it's also like good enough size for the client work.
Yeah, usually. Okay. I mean, sometimes it will be like smaller on one side and bigger in the other dimension or something, but unless they specifically want it large, usually that hasn't been a problem.
Okay, because that's what I was thinking as well, like transitioning from Photoshop to Procreate, like, okay, then you are very limited with layers, but I mean, if it is also okay for the client work, and So that
Yeah.
works.
Well, and I do have some tricks, right? Like I'll like share layers. So probably when I give layered files to clients, that's just a disaster because they get it and it's like all kinds of things are actually on the same layer that don't look like they should be, you know?
Yeah, that would be fun to see actually.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mess, but nobody's complained about it. So
Yeah, so it works. All good.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and if you think about a normal day or week in your like freelance life, how does it look like? Do you take weekends off, and how much
I
do you
should.
work?
I try to take weekends off when I can. Like my wife really likes hiking, and so we'll go, especially because Oregon is just so green and so beautiful. We'll try to like go out and go on a hike a week or something like that. But yeah, a regular day, it's just sort of exercise, email, eat, and work, and then yeah, sort of repeat, you know?
Yeah. So you usually structure your days that you have the creative part and the afternoons and the mornings you do more the business side and the exercise.
Yeah, I do. I think starting out with exercise, I do think is a good idea. As far as like leaving the artwork for later, I do usually do that. I don't know if that's actually a good idea, but that's kind of the way that I tend to do it.
Yeah, if it works for you, that's perfect. It's
Yeah,
always
and
good to get inspired.
Yeah, it's been working. I think ideally people say to like work first, like start drawing first before you're tired. And I think that's probably a good idea, but it's also like my emails all tend to sort of stack up overnight. And then anyway, I just tend to get sort of sucked into the administrative stuff early and then.
Yeah, you want to
the
have it like
drawing
sorted out
later.
so it's not
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Yeah.
Ah, perfect. And then when you like work usually on the client work, as you said, it's like you had like 4 projects running at the same time, or do you most of the time also do something like, okay, one client within a week or a month, so you always work at the same artworks, or how do you then structure this that if you have 4 projects at the same time?
It's a little chaotic. I mean, I try not to have 4 projects at the same time, but it's so frustrating when like you'll be working on a couple of projects and then some like dream project will come up. And it's like, I can't say no to this. So I'm just going to make it happen, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as structuring it goes, usually I just kind of balance them and hopefully they are sort of staggered in when they get back to you. Usually they're a little bit flexible about like how long they wait between like updates. And I do try to be upfront that like I am working on a couple of other projects. So I don't try to sort of pretend that they're my only priority, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just kind of keep a rolling list of deadlines and sort of whatever is most urgent, I get to first, you know?
Yeah. And then you do it like, as you said, like split the days and usually working also through the weekend.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I should work less on the weekends. Usually I take Sundays off. That one I do a pretty good job of. But Saturdays, not so much.
Yeah, I'm doing the same right now as well. Like 1 day a week, I'm like, okay, taking off. And then also, when you do like at least, I mean, the exercise every day helps for sure.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, if you are sitting all day, then it's just very difficult for the back, for everything. And
Yeah. And I think it just sort of starts your day off, right? When you exercise like mentally, it just kind of puts you in a good place.
Yeah. And do you also do meditation or something like this?
Not really, no. I mean, I'm religious, so like I'll pray and stuff, but not other than that, not a whole lot.
So it's more to as you said, like focus on yourself. So when you do either the prayers or something, it's like just to stop and observe the world for a second.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of the same thing. So like if you're not religious, I think meditation is absolutely a really good way to kind of get that same sort of just kind of quiet moment, you know, like.
Yeah, because I mean,
I think
just
sort of clear your head.
Yeah, as you said, sorry that I interrupted. It was more just
no, you're fine.
The meditation was more like to focus on the breath. So if you are, like in a stressful weeks or days, some people like to do that in the morning, like just 5 minutes when you're like, okay, focus on myself for a second, and then you can go on with the day.
Right, exactly. And I think that and exercise are probably the best sort of mental health things for me, where it's like you just have sort of some quiet time, some I don't know, whatever you call exercise time, workout time, sort of like get your body up and running and things like that.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to start.
Yeah. And do you also do some exercises for your hands so you don't get like problems with the wrist?
Other than just kind of stretching when I feel a little stiff, not really. I probably should.
Because
but I haven't had much of a problem with it, actually, which is nice.
And that's good. Yeah, maybe it's the exercise. Like when you do like different actually physical exercise, then it kind of connects with the wrist. So I guess it's only the people when they don't do anything and just sit the whole day and just like, okay, drawing.
Yeah, and well, part of it is probably that I'm not very good at just like sitting and drawing for hours. Like I'll take breaks while I'm drawing, and I think just giving yourself a wrist break is also probably helpful.
Yeah. And if you think about like what you wish you knew before you started out, is there something like that, the advice to young self?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this, and mostly just that it's a viable career. I would just tell myself like, you can do this. Like this is not impossible, and you need to be confident and just go for it. And like don't waste your time on other things. Just like it's possible, and I think. I don't know, at least for me, that was like such a revelation, And yeah, so I wish I had known that. I wish I could have saved myself some of that anxiety when I was making those big decisions.
Yeah, I was also super stressed. So yeah, you're totally right. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about for the future, like 5 to 10 years, what would be your dream scenario and maybe some projects you want to work on?
Yeah, like with clients, I would like to keep doing some of the things I'm doing now and also get into like fiction children's books. So the ones I've done have been nonfiction, which were great, but I think I'd be more interested in the fiction ones where I have a little bit more creative freedom. So some of that, and then just what I'm doing. But then, I think along with the children's book thing, I want to kind of push that code. Like I have this dream where I'd make kind of an interactive like digital pop-up book where it's like there's some aspect of it's like not a game, but sort of just these little interactive things. I don't know, it's like this cool idea that I don't know that I'll ever actually have time for, but
yeah, but it would be cool. Yeah, I think I saw some of those, like when you like click and then there is something happening, and it's like for kids it's amazing.
And I would like to do it in a way that it's not completely about the gimmick, like I feel like it's like I want to make it an actually good book that all that stuff adds to it rather than just sort of being a distraction. And anyway, that's the dream. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you should totally do that. I mean, it sounds great.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to keep working on the coding stuff though.
Yeah, maybe you can buy some script somewhere for it and just implement illustrations.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Combination. But and if you have some last advice for people starting out, as you mentioned, there was the wish you knew, but kind of like this summary before we finish.
I think kind of along the same lines of the advice, though, like I feel like the best advice I ever got, and I don't even remember who told me this, but it's sort of general. It's just the kind of idea of faking it until you make it, and not because you're going to lie to people or like claim to be something that you aren't. But I think there's this tendency to be like really nervous and not confident about yourself, especially when you first graduate. So I'll see people putting like on their social media a lot of the time things like aspiring illustrator or like student or, all of these things that are just sort of a detraction from them and sort of setting expectations for clients low before they've even had a chance to look at their work. And I think you need to just be confident and say, I am an illustrator or a designer or something, and just you might not believe it, but it's actually pretty easy to make other people believe it. and you can do this. You're better than you think you are. You can make it work.
Yeah, definitely. Very good advice. So so people should, like, if you have it there, aspiring artist, just write artist.
Yeah, just get rid of it. And I remember that being scary, but you know what? Just get rid of it.
Yeah. And share the art with the world, right? Because a lot of people are just scared to share it because they feel it's not good enough. But I mean, we improve all the time, so you would feel like that all the time, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, your art is good enough. Like, the world needs your art out there. Put it out there.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, totally agree. And I'm super happy that you took time and joined us here and share all your experiences and knowledge. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Eva. It's been really great.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everyone who joined today as well. And if you guys have any questions, just write it in the comments. And see you guys in the next episode. Bye.